information about science, such as nutrition, comes from evidence. And that evidence is given out in the form of peer-reviewed journal articles. So people all over the world conduct studies to learn about things like breastfeeding, infant formula, all the things that we're working on this time. So they conduct these studies, and then they follow the scientific method in so doing. They create a journal article that is so accurate, somebody else could replicate their study and should theoretically get the same results. So, and when they have completed their study, they do things like double blind if they need to do it, have enough people if they need, have enough people to make it representative, be sure they sample properly, do their statistics properly. So there's all these things scientists have to be able to do to make sense of information. So once they're done with the study, then they write it up for a journal. And I can tell you, I mean, this won't even look like it, but by the time I've got an article ready to submit to a publisher, there's probably 2 feet of versions, because I change the version name every time I work on it. So I call an article, if it's article 1, I go article 1 and put the date, and then article 2, and then, I mean, article 1, the next date, the next date, the next date, and it takes that much work. It can take a full year to do a study and 6 more months to write it up for publication, depending on how complicated it is. So anyway, you do this, you follow the scientific method, then you send it to a journal. These are peer-reviewed journals. That's what PubMed gives you. They compile information from peer-reviewed journals. Stuff on PubMed has been through this process. And what this process means is when you complete a study, you send it to the journal, the editor of the journal sends out your article to people that agree to review it on its scientific merit. Sometimes it's only 2, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's even 4. These are considered peers because they're people that understand your type of research and are not your friend. Okay, so people all over the country that do something similar. So, and sometimes when you send it to a journal, they say, well, who do you think should review it? And what I do is I go through my list of references, people that made me learn about what I was going to do. And I'll say, well, pick those people because they're real learned. So then the peer reviewers, and I've done this many times too, when you're a peer reviewer, it's double blind. So they don't know who wrote the article and you don't know who ends up reviewing your article. Okay, so it's a secret. Only the journals actually know. And then for the most part. And so what they do is they go through everything. Did they set the experiment up right? Is this valid? All the things I just talked about. And oftentimes really good peer reviewers will even tear up a paper like it's getting graded in a class. And they'll go, you know what? This is out of order. If you would make it so much stronger if you said this, I think you left out some literature here, and you need to do one more analysis. They might go that deep. And so oftentimes they're right. You live in a bubble, you've done your best job, and then somebody else says it. So I've gone back to the drawing board a couple of times and done another analysis. Paid a student one summer out of my pocket to redo a data analysis because I needed to do it. But that's where that information comes from. So it goes to a peer review, and then the peer reviewers will send it to the editor, and the editor will look at what they said and decide whether or not this is worth publishing. Like, is it scientifically sound? Sure, there may need to be things fixed in it, but is it worthy? And they'll write you a letter, or it's handled online, and then you go from there. So if it's accepted, often there's still lots of revisions, and so you go through an iterative process with that, and then it's published. Okay, so the benefit of that, and I know you guys know this, everybody on the planet right now has an opinion about everything about nutrition. They all think they're right. Think about people who think they're right about COVID. There's a contingent of people that think, based on nothing, that a certain drug helps, or masks don't help, or this or this. They're not their opinions are not based on scientific evidence, but they're based on their opinion. And I don't want to go into that stuff except to say that we want to get away from opinions, or if we have opinions, we want to say, here's where my opinion comes from. So I'm basing my opinion on breastfeeding is better than infant formula based on the components of this lecture. So I have an understanding of how to explain that to people. So that's why you're doing this. You want to gather peer-reviewed information. And you can still go to websites and look it up, like go to WebMD and go, what is this thing in my article? What is this? So you kind of flesh out your knowledge, but you don't cite those things or copy them. You just kind of flesh out your knowledge so you know what you're talking about. So you can look on You do Google searches for things, but then when it comes down to citing, you want to make sure you're citing accurate information. Any questions about this?
Dr. Fisher, so
Yeah.
you said that any article that we would find through PubMed should be peer reviewed.
It should be, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, so there's different kinds of articles. There are articles that are experimental, and I require that you cite a certain number of articles like that if you look at the directions, right? And then there are articles that are systematic reviews. And what a systematic review is, we talked about this last time, is they pull in all the papers about a certain topic and then summarize the state of knowledge, right? That's also a peer-reviewed article, because they follow a process. Here's our search terms, here's where we got the information, here's what papers we included, here's why we included them. And so what they can do is replicable. So they do the same thing, they send it to a journal, and then the editor sends it out to people that know how to do systematic reviews, and they look and see if their methods were appropriate or not, and go from there. So yeah, that's why I asked you to go to PubMed. Some of your classes, especially the non-nutrition classes, may have had you go to our library databases, right? Because librarians are all over that stuff. They want students, have y'all done that before? You type in some keywords. Okay, the reason I insist on PubMed is because I'm trying to educate you properly. When you graduate, unless you're at a university, you won't have library resources like that. You won't have access to those databases. So you would have learned a skill in college that you can't take with you. Okay, I want you to learn a skill that you can take with you in perpetuity. Because you can find, you can use PubMed forever. And more articles are becoming available for free. So anyway, that's why we use PubMed. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. All right. That's it. I am recording. Okay, beautiful. I'm going to start the lecture now. So I'm going to share. Uh-oh. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Does this look nice and big to everybody? Somebody say yes.
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. So last time we left off here. So on slide 15, so I'm just going to summarize slide 15 and then get on to slide 16. Okay, so I mentioned just briefly about infant formula, and we have a full lecture on it coming up. But formula is marketed internationally, and in developing countries, I mentioned that the water quality is so poor that infants die from using formula, and so the companies that market to poor people are basically responsible for the deaths of those infants. Those infants need to be breastfed. And in the United States, I mentioned this, and I'll talk about it again today, that formula has always tried to insidiously get at parents by free samples. Here's your presence in the hospital. Here's all these things we can do, because once you get an infant hooked on formula, breast milk isn't there anymore. It's $3,000. I started to say student, $3,000 a child for the first year of life. Okay, so it's expensive, and I mentioned the environment last time. There's a couple of articles there. If you're interested in this at all, I have really good resources for you guys. Take a look at them. I spend hours finding them just to help you with these particular concepts. Okay, so this is where we left off last time. And then this part of the lecture kind of gets into more fun, away from just the content, and more about the process of breastfeeding a little bit. So that early experience is important. And here's what they look for in a best case scenario. Not everybody has the best case scenario. Best case scenario, mom has the baby. It's an uncomplicated birth, even an unmedicated birth if she can, but that's a personal choice. So typically what they do is they put the baby on the, once they've made sure it's okay, they put it right on mom. after they cut the cord. And so you can see in this picture here, mom's holding that newborn. And the newborn, I showed you, I included some videos. I hope you're watching them on, one was the breast crawl. I mentioned this last time where a baby will, did y'all watch it? Where a baby will actually start to stepping process and crawl and get up on the nipple by itself and breastfeed. So it's instinctive what it's doing. So it smells mom, and the scents and pheromones of mom are familiar from amniotic fluid. And so it's a very, they're outside the body, but just barely, okay? And so in hospitals that are careful about promoting breastfeeding, they give the shot later. I mentioned the vitamin K shot is required, but they don't have to do it like as soon as the baby's born. They can wait that day. And then eye ointment type stuff can wait. And you want it to happen right away if you can, but it's okay if it's not optimal. Often things aren't optimal. You know, mom can be upset. Sometimes she tears, she's been sewn up for an hour, and none of that's fun. But keeping these principles in place makes a world of difference. And also formula is not offered. And that's a big piece I'm going to talk about in what's called a baby-friendly hospital. Okay, so in just a second. So who all supports breastfeeding? Well, you can't find recommendations anywhere that promote formula over breast milk. Never, ever, ever. No one says there's no way formula is ever better than breast milk. Breast milk is always better than formula. What we don't know is how serious is it in all cases, but it's always better. So support for women to be supported, they need education, culturally relevant education for families and groups. And a lot of times this type of education involves community partners. So let's say you want to go help a group of people that's different from yourself. That's not a very stable strategy to make a difference. But what you can do is contact, and researchers do this, contact people in the community that you want to work with and have them be the peer educators and have them get involved in helping people. And this is something that the WIC program has done. They use peer educators to help other WIC mothers breastfeed. So you've got somebody that's going through or has gone through what you're going through, and those types of things help a lot. But we need it everywhere, support from everywhere. And that includes at the workplace, right? A place for mom to lactate, and if she's working, and have some privacy and so forth. So specific actions that are very important. One is in 2011, the Surgeon General gave a call to action to support breastfeeding in the United States. It was basically stating that this is a very important initiative. And then I'm going to talk about these next two in detail. One is the World Health Organization, and it is the International Code of Marketing Breast Milk Substitutes, and I'm going to explain that in just a minute. And another is the Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative. So these are specific actions in the United States, and the World Health Organization is international, but that apply. So let me explain this a little bit. Okay, we've already mentioned that in poor countries where the water is not clean, and mothers don't have access to be able to energy to be able to boil water and sterilize it and all those things, what happens is babies who are fed formula often get sick and die. They get dysentery, they get into third stage malnutrition. I've seen films on this, it's the worst thing in the world. At the very bottom of the slide, it says more than 800,000 children's lives could be saved each year if they're optimally breastfed. That's internationally. Okay, so that's the World Health Organization current estimate. So what the World Health Organization did is come up with a set of, it's called the code, a code that is intended to guide behaviors in all countries. So no advertising of breast milk substitutes, which is formula to the public. So these are the tenets of the code. No free samples to mothers. Remember I said that the mothers, and hospitals often would allow formula industries to target parents. And so says, no, don't do that. No promotion of products in the hospital. No mothercraft nurses to advise mothers. What this is, these are nurses that are actually working for a formula industry, not for the hospital. And so they come in a hospital and advise mothers, hey, this formula would be good for you if it's Nestle or something like that. this is what doctors recommend. And so they'll lie and not tell them what the evidence says and say, this is a really good choice for you. And instead of allowing breastfeeding. Okay, and so no pictures, no gifts or personal samples, because bribery has gone just berserk. This has happened since the 1950s, and it happened again in the 1970s and again in the 1980s. There's just been horrible situations where children died, and so and a lot of people got bribed into promoting their formulas. So no words or pictures idealizing artificial feeding, including pictures of infants on products. And this gets to Gerber. Y'all probably remember the Gerber baby. You've seen it. It's iconic on their products. So this is fat, healthy looking baby. And so people in countries that don't know anything about that baby or whatever would look at the picture and go, oh, this'll, if my kid can be this robust looking, then that's a good thing. So they asked them to stop doing that, to stop marketing with that. And all information should, look at 7, scientific and factual, tell the truth, not opinion. All information, and number 8, and everything about the formula should also explain the benefits of breastfeeding and what can happen if infants are formula fed. And then do not promote unsuitable products. If kids are just given condensed milk that's diluted, they die. And all products should be high quality and taking into account the storage needs for that particular country. Anybody have a comment on this? Does this make sense?
I have a question.
Okay.
So my question would be, what category does formula fall under? Does it fall under supplementation? Does it fall under like actual food product, or like what category would you put baby formula in?
It's a food product for infants.
Okay, because I was thinking, I was like, well, with all of these, like this initiative in and of itself, because I know that the supplement, the industry is not well regulated by, a government body. So if, infant formula was included in that, I could also see why there's less push for it to be, not as heavily marketed, like say a fat loss pill is, at gyms and healthcare centers and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, so the thing about formula, and again, I'll get to the construction of formula. Formula is highly regulated in the United States. In fact, there's a few components they add to different formulas, but most of them are pretty similar because they're required to have a certain amount of this, certain amount of that, certain amount of fat, protein, essential nutrients, all this kind of stuff. So it's required and regulated in the United States, and it's actually regulated across the world, but it's not the formula itself, it's the mixing of it and the environment. But I wanted to say one more thing about this. This makes sense, and there's actually a code watch, which I don't have a slide on, where people all over the country take pictures, or all over the world take pictures of inappropriate practices and submit them. So there's an annual report about the breaking the code. And so I've followed that for several years to see what's really going on, because some countries have completely adopted this and seen a massive improvement in infant survivorship. Okay, and then other countries have not fought it or not been able to keep industry out because of treaties and stuff like that. In the United States, we follow a little bit of this, but there's no teeth in it here. There's absolutely no teeth in the United States. Most formula will say on the brochure or something, breast is best, but if you can't breastfeed, then here's all the benefits of our formula. But we just, it's not as critical in the United States, but it's not really supported so much because we pretty much have a pro-industry stance in the United States to make sure people can make their money. We don't always have consumer protection. We have some consumer protection, but not all of it.
So we wouldn't be able to take legal action if they are breaking this code in the U.S.?
Nope, not at all. You can just get mad at them. Okay, now one of these other things I talked about was the Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative, and this is a beacon of hope compared to some of these other things we've been talking about. But Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative is an initiative in which hospitals dedicate the facility to promote breastfeeding. Right, and so that's what baby friendly means. And so instead of promoting formula, which has been, kind of the standard over all these years, they promote breastfeeding and make sure that women have the opportunity to have this happen for them. Okay, so baby-friendly hospitals have a written policy. Everybody knows about it. Pardon me? Everyone's trained. They inform, sorry, get rid of the A, all pregnant women about the benefits, help her initiate breastfeeding within that first half hour of birth, show them how to breastfeed, maintain lactation. So a lot of hospitals have lactation consultants that come and see mom the first day, give newborn infants nothing else. So they don't give them formula or sugar water or anything like that. Practice rooming in so the infants stay there, so you learn right away. Once you have a baby, you're on a roller coaster for a few weeks where they're going to need to be fed every 2 to 3 hours. So your sleep is gone. Pardon me?
The steak will be ready in an hour.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, okay. So maybe somebody didn't have their sound off. Okay, so keeping them together helps a lot, allow and encourage breastfeeding on demand, no pacifiers. Now, this artificial pacifiers aren't bad once the breastfed infant gets going. So there's not really a problem with pacifiers, I mean, they can get dependent on them and they shouldn't use them past 1 because it'll mess up their teeth, but some parents really get some benefit of soothing babies with pacifiers who seem to want to just suck all day, so moms can get tired of that. So this, at first you don't want to do this, but once breastfeeding is established, it's okay. And then having support groups. Okay, so I have some links here, but I also have this posted on your site. And this is a link if you want to take a look at it later. But the a baby cafe was something that was started. It's really interesting. It was started in the UK, and it was a movement in which facilities that could be open to allow moms to come together and breastfeed would do that. So, for example, there might have been 100 different places in London, maybe a coffee shop that's not open at a certain period of time, or a church, or some other kind of place that had room for people to meet. People would go there and meet, and it's called a baby cafe. And then there might be someone to help them with lactation, but not a professional, just peer support. And they would go there and help each other and breastfeed together and get to kind of find a cohort and all this kind of stuff. That's an example of a breastfeeding support group. WIC also has peer educators, which is another example. Okay, but people need all the help that they can get. Okay, and so the world has changed since this started. Now, this is a map from 2018. I found a new number. In 2019, there are over 600 facilities in the United States. In 2019, which is the most recent data, there's over 600 baby-friendly hospital facilities in the United States. And now, 28% of births occur there. So about a quarter of births occur in baby-friendly hospitals. That's a great opportunity to promote breastfeeding. Texas always seems to want to do something just a little bit different. And so instead of adopting the international and national baby-friendly hospital initiative, they have their own version, which is almost the same, except they call it the Texas 10-step. Now these places, if you go to any of these links or just Google Texas 10-step, you can come to the page, and I do this in class, but it's too awkward right here. But you can go to the page and you can look up your city and where are there baby-friendly hospitals. So if your people are planning, doing family planning, they can figure out, well, where do I want to have my kid? If I want to breastfeed, let me find a hospital that's baby-friendly. Because here's the deal: if you don't, they might feed formula, and they might, and hospitals sometimes insist on feeding formula, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But then they may even insist on feeding formula with a bottle. And studies show that right when infants are born, having a bottle as opposed to breast can really interfere with them getting started nursing. And sometimes they'll reject the breast and it's a big hassle to finally get them to take it again. So starting out with a bottle versus a breast is not helpful. So anyway, so Texas 10-step occurs, and there's benefits for all with this as well. Okay, so what does this look like? How do we know a baby's getting enough milk? Well, you don't always know. That's why we go back for within 3 days, and then 2 weeks they go and weigh the baby and check them out, make sure they're not dehydrated. But what you look for is frequent feedings, at least 8 times in 24 hours, every 3 hours. And then you look for the episodes of rhythmic sucking. So they start this rhythm going, and you can watch their throat and you can see them swallow. Some of the videos I put up show this for you, so you can see how they're actually pulling milk in. If you can hear that, that's good. And then also you look at the number of diapers, and a lot of these infant diapers now have a color strip here, so it turns blue if there's urine in there, and so then you don't have to take it off all the time to tell. And so they're just going to wet a little bit at first, and then 6 to 8 diapers every 24 hours after the first couple of days. And so you look for this, and there's apps now you can write down, keep track of it, so you can talk to your healthcare provider. So what you're going to be looking for is in 2 weeks you want to have regained birth weight. So what that means is when an infant is born at let's say 40 weeks and it's born, and it weighs 8 pounds at birth, they're always going to lose weight over the next 2 weeks. And then what you want, they're going to lose weight immediately. And what you want is it for to come back up again. So by after 2 weeks, they're back at 8 pounds again. Now, why do they lose weight? Well, one of the reasons they lose weight is because they are waterlogged, before they're born, right? They're floating around the amniotic fluid. They're full of fluid. They've been swallowing fluid, and then they come out and they're no longer waterlogged. Another issue is with surgical delivery. Sometimes, while mom is waiting to have a baby, if she's going to have a C-section, they'll give her an IV, and the IV can make her fluid levels very high too, and so that can have an effect on the weight of the baby, and the baby may be heavier than it normally would be. Okay, so maybe it's 8 pounds, 4 ounces, or 6 ounces or something. So, and I'm making up that number. But so once the baby's born, then they're going to start dehydrating. Remember, they're just getting a very small amount of colostrum for a couple, 3 days, right? And so they're not taking in very much. And they have meconium, which is this sticky tar substance in their stool. And so they need to poop all that out. So there's in other words, their gastrointestinal tract is filled with a tar-like stool, and that has to come out. So they'll lose weight from that too. And so it takes a while for it to come back. But that's why we weigh babies. And if someone's worried, they can talk to a lactation consultant, and they have these very sensitive scales. They can weigh a baby before breastfeeding, then after, and see how much it's getting. Let's talk about this a little bit more. So there are absolutely challenges. And so these slides are about breastfeeding challenges and how to go about handling them. Okay, one of the first concepts is the latch. I think I mentioned it briefly, but the latch is the basically what is absolutely required for successful breastfeeding. And what this means is, and I gave you a video of this, please look at it. They're short and interesting. But so look at how the baby's nursing here. See how big and wide the mouth is? The tongue is down here. And then see that it says the lips are flanged out, so that means they're just kind of sticking out. So they're wide open, and you can see a little more color of the areola area here than down here. So that kind of points a nipple to the back of the palate here. And so that's a good latch. Notice the baby's nose is not stuck in the breast tissue either. Someone with very big breasts need to be careful about that. So you have to pull in a little bit. Okay, and so here's pore attachment. Instead of wide open mouth, here's a closed mouth. And what will happen is the baby will keep its mouth small, and it'll latch onto the nipple and try to nurse, but it's actually prohibiting milk from coming in by pinching it. So it can be so painful. even when breastfeeding is successful at first, you can get sores and bleeding, and you know, it's a new thing. It's nothing you've ever done before, and both of you are learning about it. Breastfeeding is a learning process. And so this is showing you a good latch. And so you can see how the lips are doing their, and the tongue is in here, and the lips are doing their business of pulling in milk from the breast, like here, instead of pinching it off. So it's all about the latch. When breastfeeding lectures and everything are all about the latch. So what happens when we have improper latching? Okay, so what are the causes? Poor positioning. People, this is a learned process. People just don't automatically know how to breastfeed. And we have always relied on other people for helping, your mothers and grandmothers and sisters and aunts and friends to help you figure it out. So, but if the baby's not positioned right, then it might take too small of a amount. Also, there's something called a tongue tie, which I'm going to expand on because this is very interesting. And then the last one is a lack of a wide open mouth. Sometimes if mom will offer her breast to the baby and the baby takes a shallow latch, what she needs to do is put her finger in the corner of his mouth to break the suction and pop him off. And then when he opens his mouth, real big to cry, then cram it in there. Okay. And then his mouth is big, and then that works, and that helps protect her from having it. So he's got to learn how to breastfeed, and she's got to learn how to not hate it. Because women, if you allow pain to occur, you hate it, and then that's not going to be successful. But if you get past these things, and I have a note to myself to talk about this, it takes about 6 weeks to become a pro. Some people can do it a lot faster, but some people, when it's their first kid, it's not easy to do. And we need to tell people this. We can't sugarcoat this and say, oh, you know, you'll just be so happy, you'll have a baby, childbirth doesn't hurt, you'll get plenty of sleep, and breastfeeding's easy, right? None of those things are true. Breastfeeding isn't easy at first for many people, but once these problems are solved, it is much easier than formula, and you very, very rarely find a woman that regrets her decision. Almost all of them are just absolutely giddy with the fact that they were able to get this done. Okay, so that's causes and potential problems, pain, and pain, okay? And one of these things, and I'm going to talk about this in the next couple slides, is breast infection. Mastitis is infection of the breast. That's something you want to try to avoid. So if the latch is poor, milk's not being removed, so the baby's not getting enough food. And then also she may have a buildup of the milk ducts and have an infection, and the whole thing's a big mess. So what are the solutions? Skin-to-skin contact. At birth, we saw that picture of mom with the infant on her abdomen, skin-to-skin contact. Frequent latching, do it over and over again, make them do it right. And for first-time moms, if you have help in the hospital or if you're with a midwife, they'll get right in your business and get right there and help you adjust the breast and get it in the baby's mouth and show you how to do it and provide that education. And that's what you want. You want somebody that can really help, because you need some help. And what you want is an infant, you want to force him to open his mouth real big, make sure you're not plugging his nose up. And so the chin's pushed in, but the nose is back. And you see that there's, I mentioned this earlier, how the areolas color's a little bit visible at the top there. So the latch is the problem. This thing up here is a picture of a nipple shield. A nipple shield, when women are just can't stand it, they haven't been able to get a latch going and they're in pain, and they're scared to put the baby on because it hurts so much. These are like little silicone type plasticky things that they can put on over the breast, and the baby can start learning to use this and extract milk. And then that, you know, it can start a problem, and you don't want to rely on him too long, but then, you know, once he gets where he's forced to have his mouth open, then she can try doing it again without the shield. Okay, I mentioned tongue tie here under causes. The second bullet there was tongue tie. Let me show you what that is. Another word for tongue tie is ankyloglossia. And the tongue tie, and I meant to show you pictures, so I'm going to put the whole thing down here so you see the pictures first. Tongue tie looks like this. You know, you can do this now, right? You can feel, everybody's got like a flap of skin under their tongue, right here, holding their tongue down, right? It's not completely loose. You'll feel it, right? Right, you do it. Okay, so it's there. Some kids are born with that tongue tie coming all the way to the tip of their tongue. And so you can see it's on the end here. He's got sort of a little heart-shaped thing. And for him to breastfeed, he's got to be able to stick his tongue out and phalange his lips, and he can't do it. So no matter how much you make him open his mouth wide and do this and this and this, he's going to have trouble latching. And this is a medical issue. This is not a nutrition issue, but I think we all need to know about it so we can give people advice. So surgeons and pediatricians do this, and dentists, pediatric dentists do it, can cut that frenulum. Okay, there's a similar one under the upper lip sometimes. It's the upper, they can have an upper tie as well, and that can stop them from pushing their lips up when they're breastfeeding too. So they can cut it, and that requires some maintenance. You know, nobody wants to do any surgery on your baby, but you know, it is what it is. But I believe if people are careful after this, and you have to kind of massage it and make sure it doesn't grow back right at first, that it makes a big difference. And some kids that have severe tongue tie can actually have problems with enunciation later. And so it's not just a breastfeeding issue, but also just a structural issue. So to help with tongue tie, the nipple shields to protect her, get help, and possibly get this surgery. But I am not qualified at all to make a decision on if somebody should do this. It's a medical decision. Just want you to be informed about it. All right, so positioning. At first, it's hard to get comfortable. Now they have all kinds of things for people to use. They have breastfeeding pillows and materials. So there's all kinds of ways. This is called the cradle hold, cross cradle hold. And then this is a football hold where the baby's legs are actually behind mom and her head's right, the baby's head is right here, lying down. Now you gotta be careful because you can suffocate a baby doing this. So if you're gonna lie down, you need to be wide awake, and you need to have your partner watching you. Because it can be dangerous. And then lay backward, like in the breast crawl, where the baby goes and crawls on top and then lays down on top of mom and nurses that way. So this is another way to do it. Why change positions? The primary reason is think about the structure of the breast, where there's all those milk ducts everywhere and all the alveoli all surrounding the breast, right? So those are filled with milk. And if the baby's only in one position, then not all of the ducts can get drained. And so if you try them this way and then try them this way sometimes, especially if you start to feel a hard area on the breast, move the baby around, have them nurse another way. Babies are real good at extracting milk. Now mom can also use a pump to help her with those problems, but in this way you can kind of figure out what works best for you and your baby too.
We had a question in the comments about why shouldn't you use nipple shields for too long?
Because the baby then, so I don't think they're as efficient as transferring milk, and then the baby will only use that. And so you're stuck with the nipple shield forever. So a lot of people try to get off of them. But I'm gonna also say that's a good question for a lactation consultant, because they'd give a more deep answer than that. Okay, this is my least favorite problem with breastfeeding, and this is because I had this happen, and I know a lot about it personally. Mastitis is inflammation, okay, of the breast. And there's a variety of causes. And the nipples might, if they're sore and cracked, they may get bacteria in there, start of an infection, clogged milk ducts, poor positioning, things we've already been talking about. So the baby's not positioned as well as you want it to be. And then the breast can get engorged. So there's all this milk in there and it's not coming out. And the tongue tie can be a problem as well. So potential problems with this: pain, develop of an abscess, which is a pus pocket, and stopping breastfeeding. So that's how serious this can be. Now the solutions are do it right. We've touched on these things on position and latching and emptying the breast. Also make sure mom should be resting for a good 4 months after having a baby. She should have lots of opportunity for self-care. Many women have none, but this would help as well and help them recover. Warm packs, keep the infant close, keep them breastfeeding. The infection does not hurt the baby at all, and they're the best at removing the milk, and that's the best thing to do. And many people need antibiotics, okay, because it's a bacterial infection, and it won't resolve on its own. And if you don't resolve on its own, then it could actually split the breast. It could be an abscess that actually bursts open. And so we want to take care of that. So this is a bad thing. A lot of people don't experience it. I had it happen once with my second child, and I just want to tell you how bad it was. So I remember feeling this pain in the middle of the night, just all over it. It like flu or your body aches. And then my breast hurt so bad, it felt like I had been kicked 100 times. Like it was so painful. I couldn't sit up in bed, and my husband wasn't there. So it took me like half an hour to sit up in bed to go find him because it hurt so bad. That's how bad it was. But within 48 hours, I was fine because I got a prescription for antibiotics and stayed, you did all this kind of stuff, and then it got better. I've known people that have had several infections, and many people never have them. But if you know what to look for, if this happens, then you can prevent it, and then you can also treat it. Okay, low milk supply. This is something that often people ask about. I believe a question came up before about this. So I want to make sure we're clear about this.
We had a question about mastitis and if you can continue breastfeeding after it's cured.
Yeah, you're fine. Just keep on. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is no surprise. Low milk supply. Remember, you've got to get the milk out in order to keep your milk supply up. We've talked about this. So if you don't empty the breast, but there's a new term here I wanted to talk about, and that's a mammary hypoplasia. And I'll talk about this on another slide, but in some cases, it's rare, but in some cases, there's not enough breast tissue there to make an adequate amount of milk. Hypoplasia just means a smaller number of cells, or low development of the breast. So the breast tissue is not developed, and no matter what she does, the baby's not going to get enough milk. This is rare, but we don't know how rare because I see this all the time. People think 2 to 5% of women. I've read articles that say we just made that number up. So it's not very many, but we need to be careful because well-intended family members often, the first thing they say if they're not comfortable with breastfeeding is, well, maybe something's wrong with your milk. Maybe you don't have enough milk. Family members will oftentimes, that don't understand the importance of it, will oftentimes pressure you to, oh, well, don't feed the baby anymore. Here, let's give them formula, and here's all the things, and this will be better for you. And they're not getting enough. So by you're trying to establish this milk supply, and in most cases you can, but in a couple of cases you can't. So if a baby will not grow, that's an emergency, and you need to make sure they're fed. That's when formula is a wonderful thing. Okay, but it's rare, but it exists. And then the other one is perception. A lot of people think they have a low milk supply, and they don't. I'll tell you a personal story. My daughter now has a 4-month-old baby. It's her third kid. She's an expert. So at 3 months, she's breastfed all of the kids. When her son turned 3 months, she noticed that she couldn't pump as much milk. And instead of feeling like, your breasts feel different when you're breastfeeding, they feel a little fuller and you can feel it. They just felt back to normal. She goes, I'm losing it. And I go, I said, no, you're not losing it. What happens at around 3 months is hormonal changes change how things feel. So she may not be hyperproducing, but as long as the baby's removing milk, she removes enough. But you don't know that. So if you know that, then you cannot panic about it. Right, so this is where education really has an important piece. Okay, so and she may not be able to breastfeed. We talked about this last time. If she's had a surgery, right, breast cancer or augmentation surgery or something like that. So those can be real reasons. So if her milk supply is low, that's going to the infant's in trouble. So breastfeeding either cease or just breastfeed as much as you can, then provide formula. So solutions: weigh the baby. Okay, weigh the baby if you can afford and get access to a lactation consultant, and also empty breast fully at each feeding. So let's say a baby, sometimes babies don't nurse as much as you want them to, and they seem sleepy. Newborns especially will be real sleepy. And doctors say take their diaper off, take their clothes off, make them a little uncomfortable so they're not just drifting off all the time. Wake them up and make them help with emptying the breast, because if you empty the breast, then remember, it removes that inhibitor hormone. So it removes that hormone, and then she'll make more milk again. And if the baby just takes a little bit, then pump after that to make sure the breasts are emptied so they can build up a supply. Now, one caveat to that, some people are overproducers. So if someone makes a lot of milk, she doesn't want to be pumping right and left unless she wants to donate it to a milk bank, because she can end up making, several extra bottles of milk a day that she doesn't need. Now, having said that, milk banks are a spectacular place to use that resource, right? So a lot of women that do produce a lot of breast milk can donate, and they'll filter it and you make sure it's free of viruses and all this kind of stuff, and use it for premature infants. But anyway, but to protect the low milk supply, these are the things you want to do. And see that they're swallowing, okay? See that they're getting something. Any questions about low milk supply?
Somebody asked about what about uneven production between the breasts?
Say what?
Somebody asked about uneven production between the breasts.
Oh yeah, that happens. Women, one of the things I do to keep my education up besides reading scientific articles is I'm on Facebook groups. I'm on, feeding Facebook groups. I look at moms feeding their infants. I listen to them, what their problems are. So it's these peer support groups on social media, right? So they'll talk about their problems, and women often call it their slacker brood. They go, one of them makes a lot of milk and the other one doesn't make that much milk, and who knows what's going on. Maybe the baby's more efficient on one side. They'll get to prefer side, and your job is to go tough. You have to deal, and so but yeah, that can actually happen, but it's okay. Okay, so barriers to, I got one more thing after this. Two more things. Barriers to breastfeeding. We've mentioned this before, but I want to bring it up again. School, work, fatigue, medical conditions, not enough information, no support system. And then there's the perception of insufficient milk. So the next slide, I'm going to address this. So hang on to that for a minute. And let's talk about this information. So you can broadly paint with a broad brush who's more likely to breastfeed and who's less likely to breastfeed. This certainly, you can't stereotype anybody, but this is how the trends are. And so people that are less likely to breastfeed have lower education, younger, so a younger mom versus an older mom, people that are obese. Often obesity can interfere with lactation too. And low income, and also non-Hispanic Black individuals. And so this shows the need for social support and relevant education and peer support, right? Peer support is the best way to support people. Okay, now, this is a key issue. We just talked about it when I talked about low milk supply, but this is different than low milk supply. This is the perception of insufficient milk. Okay, perception is different, right? Like my daughter, her perception was that she didn't have enough milk, but she did. Okay, so in reality, here's that 2 to 5% number. Women, only a small number of women are incapable of producing adequate amounts of milk. But half of mothers think they're not making enough. And this will lead them to offering formula to their babies. And you know what happens is the babies get hooked on formula, her supply goes down, and often the babies are overfed, and that increases their risk for childhood obesity. Formula feeding, it's a real problem with overfeeding. So you want enough milk, but you don't have to go, there needs to be enough milk. So, but we perceive that. So how do you get around that? Well, those looking for growth, weigh the baby periodically and look for growth, and wet diapers and poopy diapers, and they're fine in general. And you go, this is what healthcare is about. You go, and the height and weight of the baby are always the first thing they check. Fever, height, weight, and other measurements, right? Head circumference and so forth. So say, look at those things, and to make sure it's growing. And if the baby's not growing, then that's a little serious. And so if a baby's not growing, then all bets are off, and we need to make sure the baby grows. And I'll get to that in a minute too. So this is a great need for education. I keep talking about it, and people, sometimes students are interested in becoming certified lactation consultants. So it's something you can do along with a registered dietitian or separate from it, is become a lactation consultant. And again, all work with individuals is culturally relevant. So you want to bring in those community members that are and peers that can help teach people how more about breastfeeding. Okay, the CDC stands for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. A long time ago, it was just the Centers for Disease Control, but now it's Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And this organization, what this organization does is it keeps track of breastfeeding rates. So they manage surveys every year to ask people, how many babies were fed at the right at birth, how many breastfed, 3 days later, 3 months later, 6 months later, were they exclusive, breastfed, and so on. So the report card comes out every year. And this is current information. So let's take a look at this. So Healthy People 2020 is our objectives to improve health of the public in the United States. Okay, and so we set these objectives every 10 years. So the last set was 2010. The new set's going to be 2030, right? So we're making these soon. There'll be a new set of targets. So what we were hoping for is that increase the proportion of infants who are breastfed ever. We wanted this to be up. It used to be 75%. Now we raised the bar. We want over 80% of infants to get some breast milk. The current rate is a little higher. That's good. That means we're getting, at least babies are put to the breast. Sometimes this is just once in the hospital, but at least it's happening. Okay, and then increase the proportion of infants who are breastfed at 6 months. You can see we're kind of close there, not quite. Increase the proportion of infants who are breastfed at a year, not too far off. Now, ideally, this all should be 100%, but we can't put a goal of 100% because it's not achievable right off. And then exclusivity, like instead of adding formula 2, are they exclusively getting their liquid from breast milk here at 3 months and 6 months? And you can see about where we are. Okay, so there's room for improvement, but this is a step up over the past few years. Okay, and this is reduce the proportion of breastfed newborns who are fed formula within the first 2 days of life. Okay, so there's that. Okay.
Somebody asked, what if you use a pump and you still can't get any milk? Does that mean you're one of the 2 to 5%?
It depends on when this happens. Okay, if right at first when people pump, nothing comes out because the colostrum or maybe just a little tiny fluid comes out, and you're like, is this real? It just seems like like a little hand lotion or something. So this is not substantial. So people, when they first pump, they may not get much. Some women will have more colostrum, but some won't have much, and they're thinking, well, I don't have milk. And so you remember the stages of lactogenesis, where the lactogenesis 1, 2, and 3, and at first there's hardly any volume, and then the volume slowly starts to increase. With lactogenesis 2, the milk comes in. At that point, then you can see it, and so you can see the baby swallow, and you can see it. At that point, you should be able to get something. Now, some people can pump and just get an ounce per breast, or and then they'll pump the next day, and they just get an ounce, and so they need to get in a habit of pumping, and the habit. Set the alarm. Baby gets up at 5, let's say, nurses, and goes back to bed. In an hour, pump. Right? Just have a time where you always do that, and the pumping will help remove milk and help increase the volume. If they can't pump, which is I think what you're getting at, if they can't pump milk, they should be able to. So I would go and make sure the baby's transferring milk. The test is the weight. The test is the weight before and after feeding. Is the baby growing? There's stools and wet diapers. If those are happening, then she's transferring milk. Most people can pump. Pumps are nice. We used to have like little handheld weird battery pumps, but now they're quite nice for women. I mean, they have setups where they can, do something with their hands and don't have to sit there in a closet. So things are better. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah,
Okay.
I just meant like if you physically can't, like if no milk ever comes out and the doctor tells you that you can't breastfeed. I just wanted to know if that was in the 2 to 5%.
Yeah. Yeah, that's in the 2 to 5%. Absolutely. And you know, there are actually situations where, like I said, where the breast can have a different shape too. I mean, all breasts are different, right? This is the way humans are, right? So they're all different, but some breasts are more like long and tubular as opposed to wide. And that may be a physical, a visual indication that there's not enough tissue there to produce milk. Yeah, if milk's not coming out, if she can't pump milk and the baby's not transferring milk, time for formula. Absolutely, it's time for formula.
Cool. Thank you.
And that's what's so great about formula, right? Is because then you can still have a healthy baby and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you answering that.
Pardon me?
I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you. I'm glad you care. Okay.
Anytime.
Okay, so sometimes you can't breastfeed. And so look at, or it's contraindicated, or, which means don't do it. One, if an infant has galactosemia. You may or may not have heard of galactosemia before, but galactosemia is a inherited condition. You actually have to get a bad allele from mom and dad. And if the infant gets that, it cannot metabolize galactose. Basically, if you remember your intro, galactose is part of lactose, right? So you consume lactose, you hydrolyze it to glucose and galactose. Galactose is, as soon as it's absorbed, it's converted to glucose, like right away. Well, in infants with galactosemia, they don't have the enzymes to process galactose. So it's not converted to glucose. So that means there's a buildup of galactose in the infant's body and products of galactose. And what that does is it causes first, and I hope you're taking notes, you guys, you look like you are, but what that causes first is decreased appetite. So that may be the first thing parents notice is, wow, he doesn't seem to be eating too much. And then vomiting, and then severe weight loss. Okay, so this is a time, and jaundice. This is a time, jaundice is when they get kind of a green color to them. This is a time where you need medical help. So right away, if a baby starts vomiting, then you need to go in and they can do a simple test to see if they have galactosemia. Now, so remember, breast milk has lactose. And if an infant has galactosemia, there's no way they can breastfeed and remain healthy. One more problem with it, and this is very serious, is developmental disabilities. Okay, so the infant doesn't develop cognitively, and it interferes with cognition and function for the lifetime. So now, human milk is not the only milk with lactose, right? Some infant formula is made from cow's milk, and that has lactose in it too. So these infants don't consume cow milk formula either. In fact, their lifelong diet has no lactose in it. Now, there's a handful of products that have lactose, and their lifelong diet should avoid lactose. You can think of all the dairy products. And then they're fine. Now, they're more likely to have a kid with galactosemia because they've got 2 copies of bad genes, and so if their partner has a bad copy, then it can happen again. Does this make sense to everybody? It's serious. Okay, so that could happen, and you know, it's people have all these plans, and then they get dashed, and then they move on. This isn't going to work. Another condition is called brucellosis, and I had to look this up again every time I teach about this because it never crosses my mind. But this is a bacteria that gets transferred by drinking, primarily by exposure to raw meat or particularly milk that has not been pasteurized. This is why we have laws about raw milk sales. Okay, so if a mom she could have a condition, if she drinks raw milk, she could have a bacterial infection, and that bacterial infection could be transferred to the milk. Okay, she can get fixed, she can take antibiotics and get rid of this, but if it's untreated, then she should not breastfeed during this time. Now, if we find this out, then what you do is the baby switches to formula, mom takes her antibiotics, keeps pumping while she, throwing that milk out, right, and getting rid of the contaminated milk. And when she's all better, then she can start the baby back on breastfeeding again. One of the videos that I posted for you is called an SMS system. Y'all need to look at all of these, but where the mom will like have a bottle of milk with a tube coming down, like formula or something, tube coming down of it and ending at the end of her nipple. It's a real thin little tube. And what they use that for is when the baby's gotten used to a bottle and you're trying to get them to go back to the breast, and they got used to the bottle because you couldn't feed them for a while from the breast. And they latch the baby on, and he may fight, because wait, I'm used to my bottle, because infants have their opinions. And so, but if you can latch him on, and then he'll get that immediate feedback from the formula coming down, so it gets immediate feedback, and so then he'll start suckling. And that suckling will stimulate her milk production again and help her get back started again. Okay, so there's ways to cease breastfeeding for a while, but you need to keep pumping so you don't lose the supply. And then we mentioned this before, but if mom is HIV positive in the United States, in other countries with poor water, she's better off breastfeeding. But in the United States, HIV positive, the recommendation is to not breastfeed. Okay, so now look at this next point. Mom can offer expressed milk. Expressed milk is when she pumps it out. Okay, so it's expressed milk, and it can be offered in another way. And so and avoid nursing directly. Like if she has untreated tuberculosis, herpes lesions on the breast, and as soon as those go away, then she can breastfeed again. She has chicken pox, and she has the flu. So she wants to avoid giving her infant. The infant needs the breast milk because it can help protect against chicken pox and the flu, but it doesn't need contact with mom with all of her contagion, right? So that's that situation. Brand new information about COVID is the recommendations are to breastfeed, and because of the same thing of all the immune components of human milk that change the experience so much, but at the same time wear a mask. Okay. All right. So I believe this is my last slide. I'm completely out of order here because I'm crazy, but okay. The last thing I want to talk about is alcohol. And everybody has an opinion about this. So I want to give you two sides of what's going on with the literature now. One is the concern side. We do know that alcohol can interfere with prolactin. So actually drinking too much can interfere with milk production. But I think we're all probably more worried about, can this hurt the baby? And so maternal alcohol intake by breastfeeding moms in a recent study was associated with reduced abstract reasoning ability at 6 to 7 years. And the comparison group was women who drank the same amount but fed formula. So we have two groups of people that drink too much. One group breastfeeds, the other group formula feeds. In this case, this particular study showed, hey, formula feeding, if you're going to drink that much, formula feeding is a better option for your kid. Okay? And the second point here is parents who drink too much cannot properly care for their children. So if you drink too much and you can't take care of yourself, you shouldn't be handling a small child. So that's obvious. Now, there's been some work on breastfeeding and alcohol consumption for years, and people are very interested about it. And the problem with it is when we took the stand, no alcohol at all while breastfeeding. Now, when we talk about pregnancy, this is going to be a different story, y'all. Okay, breastfeeding is different than pregnancy. Pregnancy, no alcohol. We'll get to that. But for breastfeeding, when we said, hey, no, you can't do it, a lot of women think, well, I'm not going to go a full year without having a drink. Drinks are important. Yeah, I want to have a drink. Okay, and so then taking a look at a lot of the literature, people were not able to find anything serious if mom had 1 or 2 drinks upon occasion. They couldn't look at those outcome measures like at 6 or 7 years or and so so it's complicated and it's hard to get at the actual truth because there's so many variables going on. Drinking is not the only thing she does, right? And so Kelly Mom is an organization, and I really like them because they put together information for parents that's based on the evidence. They go out and look at the literature and distill this into a set of information that makes sense, that's ethical and evidence-based, and I appreciate their approach a lot. I'll go look stuff up on Kelly Mom to see, when I said you can go Google things to find out some information, I do it too. And I go to literature all the time and always teach from the literature, but I also go see what the popular literature says, and especially some of the sites that are okay. So according to them, the occasional drink does not seem to be harmful, and she can breastfeed while she's neurologically normal. Like if she doesn't feel drunk at all, then the amount in her milk is going to be low. The amount in her milk is the same that's the amount in her bloodstream. So it's diluted a whole lot from her drink. The baby's not going to get, she has an ounce of liquor, the baby's not getting an ounce of liquor, it's getting a very tiny amount. And per the Academy of Pediatrics, ingestion of alcoholic beverages should be limited to the occasional intake, but no more than about 2 ounces of liquor, 8 ounces of wine, or 2 beers for a 60-kilogram mother. That's a pretty generous amount of alcohol. I'm not sure how I feel about this, except I think moderation is a good thing for everybody. When you get so strict that people can't do anything they want, then they have trouble. On the other hand, if you tell people it's fine to breastfeed and drink, then they are liable to drink too much, and that may cause a problem. So look at the red comment there. Nursing should take place 2 hours or longer after alcohol intake to minimize its concentration. It goes away. Once it leaves her blood, it also leaves the milk. Okay, so they used to say, oh, you can drink, you can have alcohol, and then the next time you instead of nursing the baby, you give them a bottle of frozen milk, and then you pump that milk out and throw it away. They used to call it pump and dump. They don't need to do that anymore because the milk actually clears alcohol itself in a couple hours. Don't bed share with the baby after drinking for obvious reasons. Babies die this way. And daily intake of alcohol can be associated with infant weight gain. So if people are drinking a lot or drinking on a regular basis, that can reduce weight gain in the infant, and that's not what you want to do either. Does anybody have some comments? Usually breastfeeding and alcohol kind of brings up some questions. Again, we'll talk about this with pregnancy, but any questions here?
In the comment section, we had somebody with the concerns of alcohol and increasing risk for all cancers. They heard that just one drink can increase risk for all cancer. And he said that it hits hard considering it could go into a little baby. You're on mute, Dr. Kershaw.
Is this better? When the mom's having a drink, the baby's not having a drink. Mom has an ounce or 2 ounces of liquor. Baby's having a fraction of that because that's how much is in her blood. Okay, and another argument is many foods have some level of alcohol in them. Like I believe orange juice naturally has a little bit. So there's foods that have small amounts. And so it's almost like we're splitting hairs if it's a very small amount, but it's a dose dependent problem. So if people consume more. So, to be safe, of course not. If you want to be as safe as you can be, of course you wouldn't drink, and you would also, if you wanted to take care of yourself 24/7, you also, would not do a lot of things too that we do, right? You wouldn't have dessert, right? You'd exercise every day. You would eat exactly what, you're supposed to do. So humans are complex people. And so just being as informed as possible and providing that caution. And notice I didn't pick a side here, except to say be careful, because this is one of the things we can't study it because you can't give breastfeed. You can't take a group of women that are breastfeeding and give half of them a bunch to drink and then see how the kids come out, right? We can't set the study up right, so we just have to kind of figure it out. So we look at correlations, and those are imperfect studies. What am I doing? Okay, the last slide. Should we use formula? Not with colostrum, not at first. But if it's medically necessary, yes. Now here's the example. Some babies, especially large babies, are born with low blood sugar. Now if they're large, mom may have been diabetic, and so they may have had high blood sugar in utero. And then when they're born, their blood sugar crashes. And they may need, and they'll check blood sugar in the hospital, and they may need some formula to keep their blood sugar in a safe level. Because you don't want an infant, serious hypoglycemia might affect cognitive function if it goes on for a while. So if colostrum's not working, if the baby's blood sugar is too low, they'll typically give them formula. But here's the deal. Hospitals that are careful don't give it to them in a bottle. They just use a syringe or something to provide those calories so the blood sugar can come up and then allow the lactation to occur. So they don't start them with a bottle. They can give it to them in other ways. You can even give babies a formula with a spoon, okay, so you don't interfere with lactation. But the bottom statement, there's a whole movement called Fed is Best. And I don't have a slide, a resource for it. You can look it up, but I don't like the evidence of what they talk about. They're militant that we overhype breastfeeding, and then that's bad, and we're wrong. A lot of times we're wrong, and formula is, should be used in many cases. And so it's called Fed is Best. They have some points. You don't want a child with hypoglycemia. You absolutely don't want that. And you don't want them to suffer brain damage. But on the other hand, we tend to over provide formula for everybody, and then people lose their breastfeeding. So it's a balance, and we just need resources and help, and we need common sense. So that is the end of the breastfeeding lecture. Does anybody have a wrap-up question?
So would it be a bad idea to mix both formula and breast milk? Like, say your child is no longer wanting breast milk because they've been formula fed. Would it be a bad idea to kind of mix the two?
It's always good. The more breast milk, the better. So yeah, if they're just on formula, if you can get breast milk back in there, absolutely, that helps. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can do this. I may start a discussion thread that you can ask questions in. If I can figure it out on Canvas, I may get Kristen to help me. So if you want to ask more questions about breastfeeding, we can just run a discussion in case you had some questions you wanted to ask today, and Zoom is a little bit weird for you. So I want to get that set up. So I'm good. I'll see you next Monday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
You bet.
You.
Thank you.
Thank you.